Solar Alberta's 2023 Solar Show. Today's session is called How to Do Community Generation. Please note that we have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. You can turn the captioning on in your toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording this session and making it available on our website and YouTube channel following the show. My name is Heather McKenzie and I'm the Executive Director of Solar Alberta. I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge that I'm hosting you today from Amiskwaciy-Waskahegan, also known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is located on Treaty 6 territory and the homelands of the Métis Nation. Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place and home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Papachees, Nehewak or Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux, nations whose ancestors have cared for and nurtured these lands since time immemorial. We were delighted to have so many people register for this week and for this event in particular. To start, I just want to thank the City of Edmonton Change for Climate for sponsoring the Solar Show as a whole, and AltaPro, one of our members, for sponsoring this exciting session today. We're really happy and grateful to have them both as sponsors once again. I also want to take a minute to give a big shout out to Councillor Ann Stevenson, who's joined us from the City of Edmonton today. Thank you for joining us, Ann. If there are any other elected officials in the House today, please do make yourselves known in the chat so that we can officially welcome you, as we would in any in-person event as well. Today we're going to be hearing from Jody Conwell. Following her presentation, there's going to be a question and answer period in which you can all participate. The entire session will wrap up in an hour. As this is an online conference and trade show, I'd like to encourage you all to check out our online trade show during the week. We have listed on the slide and in the chat all the wonderful organizations who are participating in the trade show. To view their exhibitor booths, which include a listing of key solar-related services, contact info, and video introductions, please click on the link in the chat. During our formal Q&A period, we will be using Zoom Q&A for questions rather than the chat. So please enter your questions in the Q&A section. Also, you can click on the little thumbs up symbols to upvote questions that you like. Before we move forward, we're going to do a quick poll to get a sense of who we have joining us today. Please take a minute to answer the question that should be popping up on your screen very shortly. There it is. Perfect. Now, while some are answering that question, just want to encourage you to take a minute to pop your name, land acknowledgement, and any contact information that you're comfortable sharing in the chat now and throughout the event so that others can look you up on LinkedIn or email you, and hopefully some connections can begin to be formed. All right, let's take a look at that poll if you want to end it, please. Okay, so lots of curious folks in the house today. I'm not surprised. That was one of our goals in offering this session over the lunch. And welcome to the industry folks. You've probably been to quite a few of these sessions this week. So thanks for coming back. And of course, 10% students is always great. So, all right. Well, wonderful. Thank you all for participating. And it's very helpful to get a sense of the audience before we jump in. A little about Solar Alberta. I just wanted to let you know we're now in our 32nd year of operation. Solar Alberta is a not-for-profit society that is dedicated to accelerating Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. We do so by advocating, educating, and serving as an industry and community hub for solar energy. Our membership is made up of over 360 individuals and businesses. To keep up to date on all our activities, please sign up for our newsletter at solaralberta.ca. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory through our website. In this way, we act as a bridge for installers, suppliers, and other solar-related businesses to connect with their customers and clients. You can see a screenshot of the directory here on this slide and a link to it in the chat. In addition to our website services, we run a number of educational programs such as this Solar Show, as well as our seminar series and a number of in-person and online networking events as well. Our next online networking event is for women and non-binary folks working or interested in working in the solar sector and related fields. We are hosting this on March 8th over the lunch hour to celebrate International Women's Day. We're going to be hearing from the Pembina Institute's Benu Jackemeyer about her experience at COP27 prior to our networking component. So you can register for that through the link in the chat. Please note that recordings of 2021 and 2022 Solar Show sessions and seminars can all be found on our Solar Alberta YouTube channel. In addition to some Solar Show workshops that are industry oriented, this spring we will once again be running a number of online courses for solar industry professionals or those transitioning into the sector. Our 7 courses are online Tuesday and Thursday evenings on 3 to 5 nights over 2 to 3 weeks. You can register for all of them already at the link in the chat. Recordings of these courses are also available alongside our paid workshops in the new solar training videos section of our website. Just want to take a quick opportunity to encourage you to become a Solar Alberta member. This week, from February 6th to 10th only, you can purchase an individual or student membership with a 20% discount. The link to become a member is also being placed in the chat. On April 5th, we'll be hosting our annual general meeting. I just want to invite you all to sign up as members, attend, and elect your new board. There are 4 vacancies to fill on the board this year. If you are interested in applying to serve, you can do so through our website until February 26th. And of course, you do not have to be a solar expert to serve on our board. We are happy to announce that moving forward, we're going to be recognizing longtime dedicated contributors to solar in Alberta by gifting them a free lifetime Solar Alberta membership. If you're currently a Solar Alberta individual or business member and you know someone who has contributed significantly to the organization or the solar sector in Alberta as a whole, please consider nominating them for an award. We're going to be accepting nominations until March 22nd, and the award recipients will be announced at our AGM. And here's the last slide for me before we move on to the feature presentations. Today, we ask that you please consider participating in our 50/50 raffle. It's up over $870 now. The raffle ticket sales will come to a close tomorrow, Friday, February 10th, and I'm going to be doing the draw live at 8 p.m. during the Stories from Solar Sector Workers and Networking Night. Additionally, please consider donating through the crowdfunding link in this chat. The Government of Alberta is matching all donations made through this link until the end of this week. And now, I am delighted to get the session underway by introducing our sponsor for the day, Jeffrey Tyson of AltaPro. Thank you for joining us. He's going to be telling you a little bit about AltaPro and then introducing our speaker. Thank you, Jeffrey. I'll pass the mic to you and turn off my screen share.
Thanks, Heather. My name, as you said, is Jeffrey Tyson. I'm one of the owners here at AltaPro Electric. I'm also the Director of Integrated Project Delivery. David DeBruin, our President of Renewables, could not be here today, so I jumped in to help him thank Solar Alberta for the opportunity to sponsor the 2023 Solar Show and to introduce our speaker.
Oops, sorry, Jeffrey. I think your audio cut out for some reason. We have no audio. Oh, it looks like he might not be able to hear us either. I might just have to pop in the chat. I'll pop it in the chat. I think his audio is off now. Oh, are you back, Jeffrey?
Oh,
you're back. Okay, sorry.
Okay,
I think you cut out for a bit. You were about
out there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened, but just feel free to go back to Jody. I think you were just getting started.
Okay. I was just saying, before I introduce Jody, I'll tell you a bit about AltaPro. AltaPro Electric is a highly collaborative design, build, electrical, and solar contractor. We specialize in collaborative delivery projects, solar installations of all sizes, as well as service and maintenance in the Edmonton region. We have a 35-year history of providing exceptional value to our clients and streamline open communication with the design teams to provide outstanding results. In 2016, we jumped into solar with both feet, and we've continued to expand our solar business ever since then. Our team has completed hundreds of solar projects, from residential to utility projects, including Canada's largest rooftop solar array back in 2019 on Freedom Cannabis. And then we topped that record again this year with a 2.8 megawatt array on the Edmonton Expo Center. We are located in Edmonton, Alberta, but we've done projects all over Alberta and even out to BC on the coast and in between. We do microgen solar arrays, battery storage projects, trackers, rooftop, ground mount, wall arrays, off-grid, multi-source tie-ins, all of the types. So, but also our team focuses on performance, rising above challenges and standards, and we work together as a team who can fulfill all your solar electric needs from concept to completion. And as it relates to today's webinar, we are leaders in large ground mount projects, even large rooftop cooperatives that can be used in community scale generation projects. So when it comes time to roll out a blank set of drawings and need to come out the other side with a high quality design and install, AltaPro has you covered from start to finish. I'll post a link to our website and our contact page in the chat once I've introduced Jody. So thank you, Solar Alberta. And now I will introduce your presenter on community generation, Jody Canuel. So Jody is the Shift Climate Transitions Program Coordinator at the Biosphere Institute of Bow Valley. In this role, she uses a variety of community engagement tools to empower Bow Valley residents to take meaningful action on climate change. Her responsibilities span program and project development to organizing participatory workshops and authoring a monthly newsletter with tips about reducing your carbon footprint. Under her leadership, the Biosphere Institute completed a comprehensive study of the technical and financial feasibility of community renewable energy generation in the Bow Valley, which evolved into the creation of the Bow Valley Green Energy Cooperative, a grassroots socially responsible organization that aims to facilitate the creation of community-owned renewable energy generation projects in the Bow Valley, the first organization to install community-owned solar in Alberta. Congrats. She is motivated by a long-standing interest in climate change issues, sustainable living, and human-wildlife conflict resolution before joining the Biosphere Institute. Her career focused on human-wildlife conflict, mitigating the environmental impacts of the developmental projects, and habitat enhancement. So, Jody, I will now pass the mic on to you to begin your presentation.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for that introduction. Just while I share my screen here, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Solar Alberta for inviting me here today to talk about community generation. As Jeffrey just mentioned, my name is Jody Conwell, and I am a founding board member of Bow Valley Green Energy Cooperative, an organization facilitating community generation right here in Alberta. I have been with the co-op since our very humble beginnings back in 2019, and my main role is to lead the communications team and make relevant community connections. I work with the co-op in a volunteer capacity, as does everybody else on the board. As just mentioned, for my day job, I run the Shift Climate Transitions program at a Canmore-based charity called the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley, and the importance of that will become very clear very shortly. So I want to begin by acknowledging that Canmore, the land on which both Bow Valley Green Energy Cooperative and the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley is situated, stands on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional lands of the Yaak Nakota nations of Goodstoney, Chiniki, and Bearspaw, 3 nations of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Piikani, Kainai, and Siksika, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, and play on this land, and who honor and celebrate this place. So my goal today is to answer these following questions. In doing so, I will cover the basics of what community generation is, provide an overview of how Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op got started, and I will leave you with information on how you can invest in and benefit from community generation projects working here in Alberta. Bow Valley Green Energy Cooperative is a community-owned social enterprise with the vision of making renewable energy affordable and accessible. Our mission is to empower our community to reduce its environmental impact by pooling human and financial resources to foster the development of renewable energy projects and to lead our community on the transition to a more sustainable future. As the Bow Valley's first member-owned developer of renewable energy, we want to enable local residents and businesses to actively participate in greening the grid and to share in the economic benefits of doing so. We want to energize a community of change makers, and we chose the community generation model as our main tool as we work to transform Alberta's energy. So the first thing we need to understand is, what is community generation? To appreciate this, we need to know that there are different ways of connecting a renewable energy system into the electricity grid, and different regulations that go along with these interconnection types. One of these scenarios is called distribution connected or small scale generation. In this situation, a renewable energy project is connected directly into the grid. In small scale projects, 100% of the electricity is sent to the grid. There is no off-taker or specific end user for the energy generated. These initiatives are generally financed by a group of businesses who receive all the profit in return for financially backing the project. Think of a traditional large solar farm or wind farm, and projects of this size tend to become economically viable around the 1 megawatt size due to the high interconnection fees and the need for expensive pre-construction studies. Projects of this scale usually cost in the region of $1 million. These types of projects are governed under the Small Scale Generation Regulation, a provincial regulation intended to enable electricity generation from alternative sources to supply electricity directly to the grid. And it's meant to help reduce regulatory barriers and financial barriers for power generators. Under the Small Scale Generation Regulation sits the legislation that encourages community generation. Community generation, in its purest definition, refers to renewable energy that is distribution connected and provides economic benefits to communities. To qualify as a community generating unit and to be able to benefit from this piece of regulation, projects must demonstrate a social, economic, or environmental benefit to the community, such as providing training and development, contributing to a community endowment fund, or developing community infrastructure. Community generation allows citizens, regardless of their housing or economic situation, to directly participate in energy projects through full or partial ownership of the enterprise. In doing so, these types of projects keep the economic benefits within local communities, encourage local job creation, provide local environmental benefits, and often support community-focused social initiatives with their profits. When this regulation was first brought out, the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre and the now defunct Energy Efficiency Alberta wanted to facilitate the creation of community generation projects here in Alberta. So they created a fund called the Community Generation Capacity Building Programme. And here starts the story of how Bow Valley Green Energy was created. Back in 2019, the Biosphere Institute successfully applied to this programme to complete a feasibility study investigating options to develop a community-owned energy generation project in or near Canmore in Alberta. The Biosphere called this project Canmore Community Solar, and they envisioned using community financing to install a network of solar panels across rooftops in Canmore. In other words, they wanted to develop a solar farm on already built land. Working with the local solar company, KCP Energy, the Biosphere Institute identified and assessed local residential, commercial, and industrial rooftops that would be suitable for solar panel installation. They worked to estimate the maximum number of panels possible per property, how much energy could be generated, and what it might cost. And finally, they looked at how the panels could connect into Alberta's electricity grid. At the same time, they reached out to property owners to understand their interest in renting out their rooftops or other space for solar panel installation, and began working with the Alberta Community and Cooperatives Association to understand how to create a successful local renewable energy generation cooperative to finance and manage an initiative. During this process, the Biosphere Institute joined with interested community members to form a small steering committee, which subsequently became the founding board of directors of the Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op. So what did we find out? Well, firstly, many households, condos, and businesses noted an interest in renting out their rooftop to an organization to install solar on. So many, in fact, that once we hit 150 signups, we had to stop and create a wait list. However, once we started digging into the regulations, we realized that renting a rooftop, filling it with solar, and connecting the system directly to the grid under the small-scale generation regulations would require each rooftop to have its own interconnection point. Costs of direct interconnection to the grid would run into the thousands per property, and the economies of scale were just not in our favor. This was also the case for larger buildings where more panels could be installed, but it still wasn't enough to justify the interconnection fees. Aggregating systems was another idea we investigated, but this would also be difficult and expensive. In conclusion, it is much more expensive to install 1 megawatt of solar on existing built space versus building 1 megawatt of solar in a field, particularly under current legislation and interconnection rules. Now, as I mentioned, as part of this project, we gathered a very keen group of volunteers. And despite the difficulties highlighted in this feasibility study, they were not to be deterred. The team continued to meet weekly and put their ranging skills to great use, and they came up with a solution to the affordability problem. The Bow Valley Green Energy team worked out a way to install community-owned energy systems behind the meter under the microgeneration regulations. Microgeneration is what you think of when you see solar panels on a rooftop around the town. The panels generate electricity, which flows into the building. The power is first used within the property, and any power that is excess to the needs of the property is exported to the grid through a bidirectional meter. Because microgeneration projects are behind the meter, there is always a specified end user for the generated electricity. So, to recap, community generation in its defined form is currently enabled through the Alberta Small-Scale Generation Regulation. This regulation allows electricity generators to sell their energy directly to the grid. Distributed renewable energy projects, such as a field of solar panels, can cost upwards of $1 million, rendering them unaffordable for most community organizations like ours, particularly as an inaugural project for a fledgling organization. This is why the Bow Valley Green Energy created our unique business model, which operates under the microgeneration regulations in order to circumvent this barrier. While this does mean that we are not strictly community generators as defined by the provincial regulations, we consider ourselves to be, as we are using community funds to progress renewable energy, and we will give back to the community via a community benefits fund once that fund has accrued in a reasonable amount. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking about regulations now, but I think it's really important to understand this information when discussing community generation as a concept here in Alberta. So once Bow Valley Green Energy had figured out this concept, this kind of workaround under the microgeneration regulations, we realized that our next step was to get our organization investment ready. So in 2020, the Biosphere Institute, in partnership with the soon-to-be Bow Valley Green Energy team, successfully applied to the Government of Canada's Investment Readiness Programme and secured additional project funding from the Banff Canmore Community Foundation. For this project, we developed installation plans for 3 potential renewable energy generation sites, 1 a condominium and 2 businesses. These plans provided the foundation for a broader business plan and financial model. The team also drafted legal frameworks to allow the sale of cooperative membership and investment shares. During this period of time, Bow Valley Green Energy was legally incorporated and officially launched. To remove any financial barriers to people wanting to participate in our work, we also created a volunteer engagement stream called the Friends of Bow Valley Green Energy. Our co-op began selling membership shares in early 2021. But that wasn't all. At a strategic planning meeting in late 2020, we asked ourselves, what are our targets for the coming year? And we unanimously agreed that after all this hard work, we really wanted to see a functioning renewable energy project. After all, that was why we're all there, right? So thanks to the outreach work of the Biosphere Institute, we had initiated ongoing conversations with lots of properties beyond just those selected for this particular project. And with the concept of a pilot project in mind, 1 potential host site stood out. After several long months of meetings, negotiations, and the long suffering of COVID-induced supply chain delays, Bow Valley Green Energy was extremely excited to flip the switch and electrify our first project in early September of 2021 at the Ralph Connor Memorial United Church in Canmore. Since then, this installation has generated over 13 megawatt hours of power and offset almost 10 tons of carbon dioxide. That is the equivalent of planting 486 trees, and those numbers are only increasing every sunny day. So how does this all work? At a sky-high level, there are 4 easy steps. First of all, Bow Valley Green Energy identifies a host site. We undertake initial surveys and negotiate a power purchase agreement. Once we have identified a suitable host site, Bow Valley Green Energy then reaches out into the community to attract local investment and uses that investment to purchase, install, and electrify a renewable energy system on a host property. Once the system is operating, Bow Valley Green Energy collects money from the host in exchange for renewable electricity, and this income is then divided. A portion goes to our social benefit fund to be reinvested into community projects. Some goes to provide dividends to our investors, and obviously we need to make sure that our base costs are covered. As mentioned, we manage our business model by asking host sites to sign what we call a power purchase agreement, where a host site agrees to have solar panels or another form of renewable energy installed on their property, and they pay a set rate for 100% of the energy generated behind the meter by the system for a set period of time. The rate is calculated using our in-depth financial model, which takes into account a host's current tariff rates, projected grid electricity prices, and the proposed generation capacity, to name but a few variables. It's important to note that each agreement is uniquely and collaboratively designed for each host site to ensure the individual needs of each property are met. So the IRP project essentially launched Bow Valley Green Energy. It got our co-op investment ready and provided the tools we needed to install our first project. But it also taught us a few key lessons along the way. Firstly, this project allowed us to understand what motivates potential host sites. And this helps us now identify early on which sites show the highest potential for successful agreement. Our host sites usually fall into at least one of the following situations. They are sites that cannot afford the upfront costs of renewable energy, because ultimately, if you have the funds in the bank and you want to install solar, you should just do it, because you will recoup the financial benefits quicker. Both of the businesses that we worked with on this project opted to install their own solar systems in the end. Secondly, they tend to be socially minded organizations and have a vested interest in supporting our community initiatives. Thirdly, they could be a site that offers the potential to expand our host site recruitment, co-op membership, and investor engagement, providing a benefit to the co-op beyond simply hosting a system. The Investment Readiness Program also helped us to understand a very simple fact. We are a team of volunteers. Volunteers work within the limits of their own capacities and schedules, and things take a lot longer than you think is going to. And it's important to find not only the skills you need to support your organization, but those people need to be really dedicated to the cause. Now, I'm sure everyone on this call recognizes that across the major towns and cities in Alberta, there are many condominium developments. As larger sized buildings, one might think they are the perfect location for a community energy project, and we certainly thought so. However, condos are tricky, and let me explain why. Under the microgeneration regulations, a building is restricted to the amount of solar that can be installed. The panels are only allowed to offset up to 100% of the building's usage over the course of a year. This is easy when you install solar onto a single-family home where there is only one electricity meter. However, most condos are built with individual meters on each residence and another meter monitoring the energy use on any communal areas. Under the regulations, there can only be one interconnection point between the solar panels and the property. And usually in condos, that is when you attach solar to the common area meter. If energy draw in these areas is low, for example, you're only powering some LED lighting and a few components in a mechanical room, then there is only a small capacity of solar that you can install, and the economies of scale just don't work in your favor. In the condo case study we reviewed, there was a total of 20 residential meters and no common areas. In this scenario, in order to install solar under the microgeneration regulations, we needed to either effectively install 20 mini solar systems, each tied to a residential meter, or rewire the entire condo to accommodate the new power supply. Both scenarios increased installation costs and made a potential project with Bow Valley Green Energy uneconomical. Having said that, there are two scenarios where solar on condos makes sense from a regulatory perspective. Firstly, you might have a high energy use in your common areas, for example, a pool that you want to offset the energy use of. Secondly, you work with a condo from the design stage, which is exactly what we did here in our second project installation at the new iPlace industrial development in Canmore. We worked with the electricians and the developer to design the electrical system to support the installation of solar and to maximize its benefits. Bow Valley Green Energy's next priority became financing. We wanted to be sure investment dollars were only going towards installations and not supporting basic operational costs of our organization. In the spring of 2021, Bow Valley Green Energy successfully applied to the Co-op Development Program. With support from the Biosphere Institute, we began working on a new business development opportunity to become an energy marketer in partnership with UtilityNet, an energy and internet supply company. As of April 1st, 2022, Bow Valley Green Energy officially launched our energy sales trading arm, Rocky Mountain Community Energy. And we now retail residential and business energy contracts across Alberta. This addition to our product offering was created as a means to diversify our revenue and allow us to become a one-stop shop for energy for our host sites, because we are both a producer and a retailer of renewable energy. That brings us mostly up to date with how we got here. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit about where we're going. So in late 2021, the Biosphere Institute, in partnership with Bow Valley Green Energy, successfully applied to the Alberta Eco Trust Climate Innovation Fund with support from the town of Canmore. The Biosphere Institute and Bow Valley Green Energy are working collaboratively to implement the first community generation project installed under the microgeneration regulations in Calgary. The intent is to use this installation as a demonstration of the model. So alongside this installation, we're going to design and integrate educational signage and use the site to host community events that inform people about the community generation concept and offers ways for people to support our future projects. This particular project will be accompanied by an education campaign designed to dispel myths about renewable energy and promote community generation as a viable and accessible option for addressing the renewable energy transition. The final piece of this project is the creation of a project manual detailing the process of creating a community generation organization using Bow Valley Green Energy as a case study. This demonstration project will be installed on the Temple B'nai Tikva in Calgary. A power purchase agreement is currently under negotiation, and we are actively fundraising and seeking investment to finalize this installation. So a little more about this manual. Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op recognizes the benefit brought to our organization from our partnership with our parent organization, the Biosphere Institute. Because of this relationship, we were able to access funding that other for-profit organizations cannot. They provided staffing support to facilitate the projects that I've discussed with you today. And our relationship with them lent us a level of legitimacy as we toddled along in our early days of formation. As a co-op, we believe in the 7 co-op principles, one of which is cooperation amongst co-ops. And as the first co-op in Alberta to shift to a microgeneration model as a way to overcome the financial barriers of small-scale generation, we wish to share the love. And in doing so, we hope to help build capacity and encourage more people to undertake projects like ours. The intent of this manual is to provide guidance to Albertans looking to implement community generation using the microgeneration model. It will detail a case study of the creation and operation of Bow Valley Green Energy, and it will compile and provide all applicable resources, many of which were created thanks to the projects that we have just discussed. If you have been inspired by the work of Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op today, I would encourage you to seek out this manual once it's published and set up your own initiative in your local community. But this does come with a word of warning. This is really hard work, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. But we as an organization are here to help guide the way. So if setting up your own organization seems like a bit too much work, but this presentation has piqued your interest, then know that there are numerous ways to support existing community generators. Bow Valley Green Energy is always looking for new volunteers, or friends as we call them, to help support our ever-increasing workload. In particular, right now, we are looking for people who like to write to help support us with our communication efforts, and people who like to crunch numbers to support our finance and project development teams. As any co-op would be, we're looking to welcome new members, and right now we have multiple projects coming down the line in need of investment. Alternatively, if you own a commercial property or have connections with a socially minded organization interested in installing solar panels, but who are short on capital, they might make a perfect fit for a host site, so I encourage you to reach out. Here's a very brief overview of our upcoming projects. As mentioned, next to install is the Temple B'nai Tikva in Calgary. We're currently targeting a raise of $50,000 to secure the installation cost of the Temple project. So if you're interested, we are offering Class A investment shares at a cost of $50 each, with a minimum investment of $1,000, so the purchase of 20 shares. We do have a 21-year term on the investment, but capital can be requested back after 5 years of investment and may be granted at the discretion of the board. Our dividend returns are declared annually by the board of directors, and we do target to match the renewable energy companies on the TSX. And all our investors are encouraged to become co-op members, as we are limited to the percentage of non-member investment we can receive, and that costs just $100 for a lifetime share. If investing, membership, or volunteering are not in your wheelhouse, there is one more way you can support our work: by switching your household or business energy contracts to Rocky Mountain Community Energy. All profits from this enterprise go to supporting the work of Bow Valley Green Energy and advancing our economic, environmental, and social priorities. And finally, a quick note that other Alberta-based co-ops are absolutely available. Please be sure to check out your local organization to find out about their work and how you can support them specifically. And I think that's probably around enough for me. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out on this Connect Our email address, especially if anything I've touched on today is of interest. And I look forward to connecting with you in the Q&A. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jody. Thanks for sharing the love with us. We appreciate it. I like that line. Yeah, no, this is really important work. It occurs to me that we almost need a sub-classification. I think we should call you micro-comgen. Because, you know, there is a pretty significant difference between the work that you're doing and the work that, for example, the Métis Nation of Alberta is doing for community generation right now, where they are above that 1 megawatt sort of threshold that you mentioned, which makes it more affordable perhaps to work under the other regulations. So thank you for explaining how you folks are making it work, and you're so creative. Love it. We have a lot of questions. I just want to remind everyone to use the Q&A for your questions, and you can upvote each other's questions. I wanted to start by thanking you for talking about condominiums. I've had a lot of folks calling in asking about condos. While they may not be the ideal site, while existing condos may not be the ideal site for community generation to take shape, it occurs to me that condo owners are the ideal people to invest in your community generation projects, because of course they may not have a rooftop where they could put their own solar. So it's an interesting flip where they might not be the ideal site, but they could be the ideal investors. So thank you for that. We are going to be working on a solar for condos presentation over the coming year. So I'll definitely be picking your brain on best practices. All right, let's start here with the most upvoted question today. And this looks like a great one. So Jody, do you think there would be value in the government allowing condos to aggregate their residents' load for installing solar under the microgen regulation? Then they could theoretically install the solar on the common meter, common space meter, and the benefits could be shared with all residents through reductions to their condo fees.
The short answer is yes, absolutely. That is the way to do it. We have to start looking at the options of what we call virtual net metering or virtual net billing. I'm not quite sure exactly which term applies to which, but it's exactly that. It's looking at the load from the solar panels and then figuring out a way to distribute that benefit to each meter in the condo virtually. So
Yeah.
you're not necessarily receiving the solar electrons, but you are receiving the financial benefit of having solar on your roof. This, I believe, does require some participation from our wire service providers and our energy companies, and they definitely will listen to the government more than perhaps they would listen to a little co-op like us, and perhaps even just condominium owners themselves. So I absolutely agree with that statement. That is 100% the way to fix it. If you're working on that project, please feel free to reach out to Bow Valley Green Energy. We'd like to support you in the work that you're doing there, because that really is the big key to allowing community generation and bigger solar systems to be installed on condominium.
To figure out how to aggregate. Now, I have learned that virtual net billing is theoretically possible in Alberta. However, it would take a retailer or a group of retailers to kind of work out the mechanism. And of course, they don't have the financial incentive to do so. So it's wonderful to see co-ops such as yours moving into the retail space because hopefully it's something that can be looked at as a whole, given that you're maybe not as profit motivated as some of the other folks out there. So theoretically doable. I guess the other issue with condos is, and I've heard this from some green new condo developers, is sometimes if they're very high density, they actually don't have enough roof space to offset everybody's usage. And then how do you pick and choose who gets to have their usage offset? And then you start looking at siding and windows. And of course, when you get into solar integrated products, the costs can go up a bit. So I think it also depends, are you looking at a wide condo or a townhome, or are you looking at a high rise, in which case there could be some space factors at play as well. So all of this and more we'll have to dig into in the specialized solar for condos session.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to the initial design. Ultimately, if you're more interested in having a rooftop that looks very pretty and has lots of dormer windows on it, you're not going to be able to put as many solar panels on that as like a nice flat roof like the iPlace development that we showed you. And just for interest's sake, the iPlace development offsets only 60% of the building's energy usage. So even with that very big wide flat roof, we can still only offset 60% because
just because it's so high density, right? Yeah. Well, and I guess it would depend on the efficiency of the build as well, and how efficient it is. We do have some members who have been doing solar on condos to offset the common space. They've been very innovative in terms of rooftop gardens. Some are doing railings. It's so, definitely check it out. I think it's worth considering for those who are interested, but let's get back to the ComGen topic here. Let's see here, next question up. Has the co-op or Solar Alberta lobbied the government for changes to the small scale generation or microgen regulation to overcome the cost issues? I would say we're working on both fronts. So Solar Alberta is actively working on the microgeneration regulation piece. We're hoping, but not succeeding yet, to have the cap lifted so that essentially, hopefully some microgenerators wouldn't be limited to producing only as much as they consume on site in the year. So we're kind of working that angle. You can find that on our Advocate With Us section of our website. But I noticed at the recent, what was it, the Rural Municipalities Association, that the co-ops seem to be working together with them to get some tweaks to the small scale generation regulation. Jody, do you feel prepared to speak to that work? Because that's kind of the other side of the coin, which I was happy to see that folks are working on.
I have to be honest, I'm not the person in the co-op kind of detailing all of that, so I don't really have the knowledge. But I will say that our co-op is trying to petition the government to make these changes, to make community generation more affordable from a community generator's perspective. One of the big things that I would say is that when you as an individual under the microgeneration regulations install your own solar, you get given a meter by the electricity company, the wires provider, sorry. When you put a small scale project on the grid, you have to pay for that meter. That meter in itself is $100,000. So not only do you have to pay for all of your construction and this meter and the site survey fees, and then you have to potentially pay for any upgrades to the electrical system. So we have suggested that if they could disconnect the community generation regulations from the small scale generation regulations so that the wires providers are covering some of those costs, in the same way that they do for micro generation, then perhaps it becomes a little bit more affordable.
A third path. So we can fix microgen, I should say amend it. It is doing a good job of what it was created to do, but we could change it to enable more community generation. We could change the small scale generation to make it easier, or we could develop a third path as you're suggesting and sort of pull that community generation regulation away from the small scale generation piece and give them some options that aren't in place for the larger scale systems, hey? Fascinating. Lots of good food for thought. Yeah, I'm not sure which direction the government will go. At this point, all they've said is, thank you for your feedback. We will be reviewing all of this in due course. So hopefully due course is in the next couple of years here. All right, another question. Right now, I'm working on, I'm speaking on behalf of Anonymous, I'm working on community share solar and doing a comprehensive study around the world to see why, in some places, the community share solar is successful. I have a question regarding the legal side of the community share solar. Is it legal to do peer-to-peer, PTP, transaction in a solar community in Alberta? If not, what is the main reason for that? If I'm understanding this correctly, it's like, can I just like lease my dad's roof and have a contract with him? Is that how you understand that question, Jody? Or do you have a more nuanced understand?
I'm afraid I don't necessarily know much about this. So we do theoretically rent the rooftop spaces, but we rent them for $1. So, and that is more so that we have a contract that says that we own the solar on that rooftop, so that if a building is sold whilst one of our projects is on it, we have a piece of paper that we can take to the court and say, well, that solar installation is not part of the sale.
Right, you need to have a pretty strict contract in place. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that we do have consultants in our directory who probably know the answer to this. So I'm going to refer Anonymous to our directory to connect with some of our consultants. My instinct tells me that in Alberta, we like to make deals and we like to make it easy for people to make deals. So probably as long as you have a good understanding of contract law, you can sort this out, as you have, Jody, gotten very creative and establishing your own contracts. But I do imagine that your Bow Valley probably had quite a bit of legal consultation in the process of drafting your contracts. So you probably didn't just grab a template off the internet, I suspect. So maybe if you're going to go and make a deal with Bob next door to lease his roof, because he should be getting solar and he hasn't, you might want to make sure you run all those contracts by a lawyer, especially because, as you mentioned, Jody, what happens if you sell the home? I know with the Clean Energy Improvement Program, that's really interesting because that's money that is lent and it moves with the home. So if you buy a home that has received funding through the Clean Energy Improvement Program, you are also inheriting that component, and there's a pretty clear contract for that too. So good questions. Thank you for that. Sorry we don't have a lawyer on hand, but very excellent. Okay, in the microgeneration regulation, there is a provision for no costs for interconnection. Oh, I think you touched on this, Jody. If this provision was extended to the small scale generation regulation for community generation looking to self-supply, would this change the equation sufficiently? So I think you said that costs about 100,000.
Yeah, so when you're looking at the cost of the meter, the cost of the interconnection studies, the any site surveys that you need to do, you're looking at $100,000 to $150,000 just to put that connection together. It could be even more than that if there are other things to do. So yes, if the community generation regulations looked a little bit more like the micro generation regulations, it would make the economics a lot more favorable. Although to say that one of the reasons why we didn't launch straight into small scale generation is because we're brand new. Like who wants to give us $1 million? Like, you know,
I do if I had it.
if you had it, right?
But you
But
got to build up your credibility,
yeah,
right?
that's exactly it. So before we start trying to do $1 million raise, we wanted to prove that we're a viable organization. So we're looking at that as our like 10 to 20-year plan rather than what this whole community generation was designed for somebody to immediately start operating at the 1 megawatt level, like the Métis Nation. But it's just not that feasible when you think about logistics of it.
Unless you're a nation. Maybe
Unless
you
you're
guys, but yeah, it is like that's probably what it took to get it going, right? And also the government supports, as you mentioned, there were a number of various supports that you folks applied for that the Métis Nation accessed, which aren't in place right now because we no longer have the provincial carbon tax, which was funding a lot of that. So those community generation supports are no longer in place in Alberta. I understand the federal government is looking at maybe making it easier for nonprofits and others to access some supports, but I haven't yet heard from anyone who's successfully gone through their new paths that they're exploring. But really great questions and good food for thought. Hi, right now I'm working on, oh, I think we did that one. Sorry about that. Gordon Howell, I think you've got an extra zero in there, Gordon. 100,000 for a meter. How so? Interval meters typically cost 2,000 each. The meters on our own houses cost 200 each. So yeah, how did you get that quote? That's interesting. It's so high, so much higher for you.
Yeah, so back in 2019, when we were doing the original feasibility study, we hired let's call them a contractor, who works in the small scale generation space. Their job is to help businesses install megawatts of solar fields. And we went to them and we said, okay, this is what we've got. How much is it going to cost us to interconnect this system? And they said, that's the number they gave us.
Okay. So we might need to check around because maybe Gordon can get some better numbers. I will mention Gordon is also a consultant in our directory. So if there's any chance he can help figure out better numbers, I think everybody in the community generation space would probably welcome that. I should mention, actually, it does sound like a lot when you talk about community generation, how much it can cost. But we actually had a presentation such as this a couple years ago when looking at utility scale solar. And what we learned that if you're looking at a system of 5 megawatts or larger, often those initial studies and all that initial process that you discussed can actually cost almost, they said 1 to 3 million. So it was even considerably higher than the costs that you're sharing today. So, so it is fascinating as you scale up. It does seem like a lot of those initial study costs and the hoops you jump through pile up. And I mean, I think some of those are because folks are doing their due diligence, making sure that we can accommodate the power on the grid when it's at such a large scale. And then in your case, it is very confusing. So because you're not talking about massive scales here. So. All right, great that we're getting these discussions going. Let's find a better price out there. Which utility have you been working with and what are the cost breakdowns for the studies, connection metering and monthly fees for the small scale community generator connection? Do all the utilities charge the same? Now that said, you're not doing small scale ComGen, you're doing microgen with ComGen. So I think maybe
yeah, I can still speak to that.
Okay, great.
I undertook the initial feasibility study during my time at the Biosphere. So in Canmore, we are connected to Fortis's grid. In Calgary, you're connected to NMAX's grid. There isn't much else going on, I don't think. So we just primarily dealt with Fortis. We didn't really talk to NMAX, but you can actually just go on their website and it tells you exactly how much these things cost. The initial survey, like interconnection survey, just to have a conversation with them, it seems that this is literally all it buys you, is $10,000. And then the next phase, I think, is about $20,000, and then the following stage is about $40,000 to $60,000. So each stage of interconnection, it just increases. I imagine that NMAX's prices are pretty similar, but you don't have a choice. You can only connect to the wire service provider in the area where you want to purchase, install your community-owned power generating unit. You don't have a choice. You have to go to that particular service provider.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I've heard that no one has yet brought up a proposal forward for EPCOR yet. Oh, and Gordon says EPCOR D&T doesn't charge for interconnection studies. That's good to know. And actually, I think they're hoping someone might bring something forward on this front so that they could actually start digging into it. At least that was my impression is hey, let's try and solve some of these problems. So it's interesting to hear there's not consistency across the province right now. I think that's probably another area for us to work with the province on is, can they try and make sure that everybody's being treated equally? Because it would be a real shame if some community generation proponents in parts of Alberta were being charged $100,000 and others were getting the same deal for free. So that would not be very fair. So definitely good information. Thank you for sharing, and we'll keep that conversation going. It's still in its early days, all of this community generation work. So I think a lot of folks are just trying to figure out how they're going to make this work. All right, looks like we have time for one more question here. And then before we end, it looks like Guy's wondering if you could maybe either put up your treaty area slide. I almost wonder if you could just put in the chat where you got your treaty area slide before we leave today for Guy. He was curious about your map at the beginning of your presentation with all the different treaty areas. And so, but I think that's probably a link you found on the internet, I'm guessing. So I bet you could pop that in. But let's see what Mike says here. If a community multiplex, like a pool, curling, field house, if it's run by a society at arm's length from a municipality, and maybe they're not for profit, with large energy expenditures and lots of roof space, that seems like it'd be a good place to invest for you folks. Is that something you would consider? What else should folks consider if they have such a property?
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to us and we can have a conversation. I think the key thing is that if you do have the funding in your bank account already, you really are better off just installing your own solar system, because you immediately begin to see the financial returns and benefits of that solar. If you partner with us, the benefit you're getting is that you don't have to give that initial outlay of financial capital, right? So yeah. We're providing that capital for you. You still get the benefits of solar financially, but it takes longer for you to see that financial benefit come to your organization because you're paying us for the energy, whereas otherwise you would have been getting that energy for free. But by paying us for energy, you're effectively paying us back for buying your solar panels for you. I'd say anybody who has a potential host site, just to reach out and we'll have a conversation. The first thing we like to do is have a meeting and discuss what is the situation, what is your situation, what is our situation, how do we work together, and you know, what are the breakpoints for both organizations, because we are volunteer run. We have to pick and choose our sites, because we can only pick the successful ones, right? Because we don't have the capacity or the energy to chase down like the businesses that ended up folding on us and putting up their own solar.
Too much work. You have to vet them. Check these boxes. You know what? One of the ways that Solar Alberta could help with this, Jody, and I think we've talked about this recently, is Solar Alberta is getting more and more community generators as members. And we have a request for proposal section on our website. Typically people use that to request a proposal from an installer, but there is nothing stopping anyone in this webinar today from, hey, I'd like to request a proposal for a lease agreement. And our ComGen folks could reach out to you and say, hey, let's make a deal. And yeah, if you have the money to do it and the will, then go for it. But if you don't, for example, town of Innisfail, they had the political appetite to lease land, not to establish their own solar array. So they are leasing land and they're getting a return on that investment. And so it really depends on your community. If you're in a church where people are willing to put up the upfront cash and get that array, do it. But if you're in a religious community or something where, you know, people are really nervous and they feel like it's just a terrifying prospect, then a great way to deal with those nerves is to talk to a community a generator such as yourself, Jody. So I feel like across Alberta, people have to read their community sense, you know, do we have the interest to actually give her on our own? And a lot will, and others are going to need to say, hey, let's take the safer route. Let's get a nice long-term deal in place. Let's have some predictability. So for anyone who's a little more nervous financially, this is a great option for them to still participate in the solar sector. But yeah, I appreciate that you don't want to have a million conversations with a million people who are just going to go put up their own solar roof at the end of the solar on their roof at the end of the day without you. So definitely good conversations to be had. Well, we're getting loads of thanks in the chat. I hope you're seeing some of that, Jody. I know I told you not to look at the chat, but you should look at it now because everyone's thanking you. We're going to wrap up. I want to thank AltaPro one more time for sponsoring today's session. I'd like to thank Jody for her incredible webinar. We are recording this, so I'm sure a million people are going to watch it over the coming year. And of course, City of Edmonton Change for Climate as well for sponsoring the week. And all of our guests for attending. Thank you so much. What a great turnout today. Wonderful session. Any closing remarks you'd like to share with us, Jody? Thoughts for folks to take away with them and take and run?
I think the key message is like community gen is open to everyone. So it doesn't matter how much or how little you want to be involved, you can still be involved. And by being involved, you're taking action and helping the renewable energy transition. And that is something that we all need to do.
Absolutely. Even if you can't make $1 million, you should still do it because it's actually part of fighting climate change. So I appreciate that, Jody. It's funny how rarely we actually talk about the imperative, the climate imperative to do all this work. We're always talking dollars and cents, but there's actually a bigger picture out there as well. So thank you, Jody, and thank you everyone for your time.